It's not hard to be pessimistic about the UK economy. Growth has proved elusive to successive governments. Inflation is still too high, and only last year there was speculation that the UK might even need an IMF bailout. However, in the past month or so, new data has started to paint a slightly rosier picture, suggesting that the UK economy might finally be doing, if not brilliantly, then at least slightly better than average. So in this video, we're going to explain why the UK economy actually looks alright at the moment, and why there's cause for optimism going forward. If you love staying informed and want some of the best reporting on YouTube, then subscribe and ring the bell for more. So let's get straight into it. As we see it, perhaps the main reason to be quietly optimistic about the UK economy is that there are lots of reasons to think we might be on the cusp of a boom in domestic consumption. For context, consumption basically just refers to households spending money and buying stuff. It's one of the four components of GDP, along with investment, net exports, and government spending. And, as is the case in most developed economies, consumption accounts for a majority of all economic activity in the UK. One of the structural issues for the UK economy in recent years, however, is that consumption has essentially stagnated since 2018. This hasn't happened in most other developed economies. Both the US and the euro area, for instance, saw consumption rates return to trend after the pandemic. No one's quite sure why this is, but it's probably a combination of Brexit, pandemic, and budget-related uncertainty, which made British households uniquely anxious, and thus encouraged them to save more of their income for fear of future emergencies. You can see this by looking at the so-called savings rate, which measured the percentage of household income saved rather than spent. It's risen from about 5% in 2023 to above 10% today, a level rarely seen outside recessions. The fact that the UK saw higher and more persistent than average inflation probably didn't help either, because rising prices will also make households more likely to save, in order to guard against future declines in purchasing power. This also forced the Bank of England to raise interest rates higher than, say, the European Central Bank, which will have made saving more attractive and forced homeowners to spend more of their income on paying off their mortgages. This shows up in survey data. The percentage of Brits saying they're cutting back rose from about 30% before the pandemic to above 50% during the inflationary episode we saw in 2022 and 2023. The good news is that most of the reasons for households to pare back on spending are now falling away. Most of the budget-related uncertainty seems to have passed. Interest rates are falling, and while inflation came in pretty high in December at 3.4%, there's a pretty widespread consensus it'll fall sharply in the coming months. ING, for instance, expects inflation to fall below the bank's 2% target by April. Not only that, but all that saving that Brits did over the past couple of years means that UK households are less indebted than basically all their international peers. According to OECD data, for instance, the UK household debt has fallen from 140% of GDP in 2022 to a recent low of 121% today. This has helped take the UK's overall debt burden, that is, including household, corporate and government debt, down to about 220% of GDP. Lower than usual debt levels imply that, if households and businesses get their confidence back, they've got lots of space to spend, which would be great news for the UK economy. There's some tentative evidence that this is happening already. Both retail sales and GDP outperformed expectations recently, with UK GDP growing by an impressive 0.3% in November alone. So that's the first reason to be optimistic about the UK economy. We might be on the cusp of a long-awaited boom in consumption. The second reason is that we're also seeing an increase in another component of GDP, namely investment. As we've detailed in previous videos, the UK has suffered from chronically low levels of both private and public sector investment. The overall investment rate in the UK fell from slightly over 20% of GDP in 1990, roughly the same as other developed economies, to about 17% at the turn of the millennium, one of the lowest in the G7, and hasn't recovered since. Chronic underinvestment is probably the main reason UK productivity, that is GDP per hour worked, has fared so badly in recent years. Among the richest OECD countries, for instance, labour productivity has grown by 0.9% annually since the 2008 financial crash, whereas in the UK it grew by a mere 0.4%. Additionally, while the UK had similar productivity levels to France and Germany in the early 2000s, it started falling behind in the late 2010s. Fortunately, however, in the past couple of months, investment has finally started to tick up. According to ONS data, both overall and private sector investment, which were essentially flat from the Brexit referendum in 2016 until really 2023, have risen steadily for the past 18 months or so, and is currently increasing at an annual rate of about 3%. This is probably because, as budget-related uncertainty clears up, UK businesses have finally started to feel they have sufficient certainty to make longer-term investments. This newfound optimism is also being reflected in survey data. The S&P's so-called composite index, for instance, which basically measures sentiment across both manufacturing and services, has ticked up in recent months, reaching a 21-month high in January. Anyway, the UK economy desperately needed this increase in investment, and it should come as a welcome relief to policymakers. There are also some tentative signs it might be paying off. The most recent data, for instance, suggests productivity grew by about 1.4% in 2025, which would be the highest reading since 2017, excluding the pandemic, and roughly double the post-2008 average of 0.5%. Anyway, the final reason to be optimistic about the UK economy is that the public finances look like they're at least in slightly better nick. Only a few months ago, we were talking about how the UK's borrowing costs were surging ahead of the rest of the world's, apparently reflecting the unique precarity of the UK's fiscal situation. However, as you can see by looking at the so-called spread between British and German 10-year bond yields, that is, how much more expensive it is for the UK to borrow money than for Germany, in the past couple of months, this has quietly unwound, and UK borrowing costs have started looking a lot more normal. Furthermore, borrowing came in under forecast for the first time in ages in December, falling by a remarkable 40% year on year. Now, it's important not to overstate this. The UK's fiscal situation is still pretty dire, and borrowing costs are still a lot higher than the government would like. Nonetheless, things look a lot better than they did a year ago, when even serious people were talking about the possibility of the UK going cap in hand to the IMF. Now, this is a big story, and amongst every other big story happening right now, you might feel powerless in the current climate. The problems feel massive, and individual actions can feel meaningless. But what if we told you that you could be part of something bigger, something that actually turns concern into action? Well, that's where our friends at Planet Wild come in. Planet Wild isn't just your usual environmental organisation. It's a passionate community built around a clear focus, protecting and conserving the world we all live in. We're more aware than ever that the world is a scary place, and the state of our planet needs change. So, every single month, the Planet Wild community funds a mission to protect endangered animals, restore our forests, and clean our oceans. They document all these missions in videos here on YouTube, so we can see exactly what we've helped to achieve. The impact we've made will be right before our eyes. From cleaning up Mumbai's plastic river to protecting Europe's last ancient forest, and even saving elephants with the help of bees, Planet Wild will stop at nothing to make the world a better place for every living being on it. So, where do you and I come in? Well, by becoming a member, we're directly funding a brand new nature mission from the comfort of our own home. We support, they execute. If you want to join the growing community making a real difference, Planet Wild is the place to be. Big or small, your difference matters, and you can contribute as little as $6 a month to help protect nature. We're big fans of Planet Wild, so much so that the first 100 people to use code NEWS2 will get their first month paid for by us. Just scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. By joining today, you'll immediately make a difference and even be able to see your impact in less than 30 days on YouTube right here. You can cancel your membership at any time, so there's absolutely no catch, just an easy and remarkable way to create real and lasting change. If you want to see them in action, check out their mission at cleaning up Mumbai's plastic river.